Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me at the MarketSite studio in Times Square, New York City, we have Tawan Davis, founder and CEO of the Steinbridge Group, to discuss whether or not our nation needs a second New Deal. Tawan, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Let's talk about the macro before we get into the second New Deal. We're sitting here just about an hour before the interest rate hike decision on July 26th. Explain to us how that is impacting stagflation, home prices, the average American.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is to really understand why the dramatic moves that the Fed has made over the last year or so haven't really moved the needle on certain aspects of the growth. And I think there are really three reasons for that. Number one is because it takes a 19th century and early 20th century economic idea of monetarism and imposes it on the rest of the economy. The fact is that we live in a much more complicated economy with globalization and the fast movement of information. Second is because it only addresses one of at least three reasons that inflation came and got so strong in the first place. And third is because there are so many other complementary and competing things going on in the economy, and this only really looks at one of those things. And so I think that the movement in the interest rates that have been so dramatic hasn't had the impact that we expected it to have.
It feels as if it almost directly impacts Wall Street and the financial markets almost immediately relative to the rest of Main Street America, because to your point before, these policies have not had a chance fully to work their way through the system.
Right. I think and that's another reason why I think it hasn't been as effective, is because it exacerbates the decoupling of the American economy between Wall Street and Main Street. What you see is that Wall Street reacts almost immediately to the interest rate changes, but those interest rate changes are taking a great deal of time to work themselves through the rest of the American economy.
I think part of the issue too is home ownership.
Absolutely.
It's not attainable for many people, and it's not only just because of rates. Of course, there's inventory supply issues within the real estate market. That's something else, but affordability is really out of touch here.
That's exactly right. I think that real estate is one of the best examples of the challenges of this policy, and particularly home ownership. As I said, there's a decoupling between Main Street and Wall Street, and here's what's happening. Number one, it is now more expensive, probably by 30 to 40% to pay your mortgage, right? Mortgages are now 30 to 40% more expensive. Number two is that fewer homes are being produced because now it's more expensive to produce a home. This last month, only 1.4 million homes were produced, and that's continuously down. And number three, home prices are actually up, right? They've been up for the last 2 months. You have these three very challenging trifecta of challenge for the American homeowner. Number one, prices of homes are higher. Number two, mortgages are more expensive. And number three, there are fewer homes being built. And so that makes it so challenging for the average American family.
And if we continue to live in a higher interest rate environment, part of the challenge is why it's stagnant on the market. Most homeowners are 4% sub on their mortgages. Well, why are you going to leave unless you have to?
Well, unless you have to, and which is also going to mean that not only is there only 1.4 million homes that have been new homes that have been built, but there are going to be fewer homes on the market. And the challenge is that for Americans, we live in what I would say is an almost post-pension society. 1/3 of Americans' net worth in every family is in their home. And so if people, there's a great statistic. In the 1980s, it took about 2.2 years after people got married to buy a home. Right after the 2008 to 2009 financial crisis, it took about 6.6 years. Now it's an estimated 9 to 11 years before people after they marry are going to be able to buy a home and start a family. And so it's just boosting rentership in the United States, and it's challenging home ownership.
Which is so counterintuitive because the economy, for all intents and purposes, firing on all cylinders. There's really not a massive weak spot. So let's talk about that. Your notes say our nation needs a second New Deal. Sure. Explain to us what you mean by that, and what are some potential outcomes?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the fact that this monetaristic policy that the Fed is taking only addresses one of the three reasons why there was inflation in the first place. The first was actually caused by the Fed, right? If you think about QE, quantitative easing, that was coordinated globally between so many of the powerful central banks, that basically put more money into the global economic system and led to inflation. The second was because, in part because of COVID and in part because of certain administrative policies, there was a dearth of material supply. And so the cost of goods and the cost of services went up. And third, the United States spent $953 billion, almost $1 trillion, on direct payments, COVID payments. And that basically put more money in people's hands while fewer goods were being manufactured. And so all three of those mean that there is more money for the same amount of goods. That's the very definition of inflation. And so I think that the way to the Fed and the federal government can address that is not only do interest rate raises, which addresses number one, but have a new deal, which actually puts people to work. And what do I mean by that? I mean that go back and do a major infrastructure program. Build bridges and build roads. I mean, America has a crumbling infrastructure. Build schools and hospitals, put people to work, and that will build a bridge between what is the Main Street economy and what is the Wall Street economy.
Right, and it seems like it would be a bipartisan, simple thing. I mean, you want your constituents
Absolutely.
to do well, and hopefully this wouldn't be a talking point that they would fight over. So tell me more about the Steinbridge Group. I mean, you're an impact investing firm. What are you focused on?
Sure. The Steinbridge Group, we're an impact investment firm with real estate as the first mover of that impact. And so right now we have about $500 million of active developments across the country in different areas, and we're growing that to roughly $1.2 billion over the next 12 to 24 months. And the goal is to start with real estate as a focus on affordability and homeownership, and then move into other aspects of impact investing.
So tell us more about that. What are the housing strategies that you're employing at Steinbridge?
Sure. There are really two or three major housing strategies. Number one is we do build to rent, so we basically partner with nonprofit institutions who have excess land. There's an idea that I call the latent asset theory. America has ample land, particularly some colleges, some universities, some nonprofits have ample land that is unused. And how do we catalyze that land, particularly in urban and transitioning parts of the country, and contribute that to active economic uses? So that's strategy number one, is to partner with those institutions and to help them catalyze their latent assets and resources. The second is going into transitioning parts of the country and rehabilitating existing properties. And we can do that single family as well as multifamily. And the third is finding the urban infill strategy, where we find opportunities to build impact investment developments in transitioning neighborhoods that are of scale. And so those are our three major.
Do you have community projects that are in the works already?
We do. When the summer, we're going to announce actually some pretty major ones over the next coming weeks. Right now, we have active projects in Texas, Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, and we're looking at opportunities in Florida and in Georgia.
What does the time frame look like when you start working on a property to getting people in the homes?
Sure. So there are two different time frames. So for the build-to-rent strategy, and first of all, I should say that all of our rental strategies actually point toward home ownership. So one of the things that we focus on is we just announced a major coordination with PNC, one of the largest financial institutions in the country, to promote home ownership in the country. And so what they're doing is they're providing loans, they're providing low down payment loans, they're doing down payment assistance, they are helping folks who need extra education and financial literacy. They are forgiving certain fees to help folks get into homes. And so we began that and announced that in May. And that helps what is in our build to rent and our rehab strategy, those renter families, to become homeowners because of the importance of home ownership in the American economy. And so I just wanted to talk about that and mention that as well.
Yeah, all right. Well, great work that you're doing. We appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Good to be with you.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.